Huehueteotl, the old man spirit, is one of the oldest Mesoamerican gods in both history and mythology. This episode will show examples of how writers have spelled the name of this ancient fire god since the alphabet arrived into the Americas 5 centuries ago. Hello! This video will look into a few of the most important conventions for spelling out Nahuatl from colonial to modern times. It will also discuss the main benefits and disadvantages of each for learning the language. Then it will end with my reasons for choosing the orthography or spelling style we will be using throughout the Nahuatl for Aztec Religion series. Most of the colonial texts on Aztec religion were written specifically to document survivals of indigenous practices so that the church could prevent them from contaminating the converts' faith by erasing them altogether. Because so many writers were coming from different backgrounds, including native Nahuatl speakers learning to write in the Spanish alphabet, the first texts were inconsistent with spelling rules. Their only common trait was the attempt to write this foreign Native American language with familiar letters from the Spanish alphabet. This is a good moment at which to point out an important idea in writing the names. The Spanish often used 2 letters to represent W, the W, with or without the initial stop. When the sound started a syllable, the U followed the consonant letter. However, when the sound ended a syllable, the U would precede it, as with the example for eagle, Cuautli. Examples occur in the 2 best-known names of the Aztec fire god, Huehueteotl and Xiuhtecuhtli. Notice that the W's are spelled HU in the first case because they start each syllable. In the second, the W and Q end the first and second syllables respectively, and the letters are reversed to UH, UC. Another quick note about the earliest writings is that they were inconsistent for the glottal stop, but they used the letter H when it did appear. Without this letter to represent the sound, the combining noun root for the fire god could be read as either Huehue, drum, or Huehue, old man. Given his elderly physique, the meaning is clearly the latter, so the glottal stop should be included. As in the first written texts, the letters are easy to produce, but the spelling requires either contextual foreknowledge or educated guesswork when the reading is ambivalent. By the 17th century, the alphabetic script for Mexica Nahuatl saw more vowel markings to indicate either length or a following glottal stop. A macron, the horizontal bar over a vowel, represents a long vowel. Both the grave and circumflex characters meant that the vowel precedes a glottal stop. A grave if within the word, a circumflex if at its end. And don't worry about trying to combine these markings. A long vowel never precedes a glottal stop in Mexica or any other Nahuatl dialect that I've studied, so there would never be a case where you'd have to combine the macron with a grave or circumflex on the same vowel. It is both concise and consistent. We can economize the letters and still read the exact pronunciation with precision. At the same time, the vowels are tricky to type on modern devices unless you have a European setting or shortcut keys. The 1645 grammar by linguist Horacio Carochi remains a seminal resource for Nahuatl grammar because it relies so thoroughly on this convention. It is systematic with its presentation of sound, an essential practice for modern linguistics, which takes us to the 20th century. The first Nahuatl course I took was in 2002, and that was the first time I had studied the language without the traditional Spanish alphabet. The course took a structural linguistic approach, beginning with the most basic units of sound and advancing to more complex patterns of grammar. This is in fact the approach this Nahuatl for Aztec Religion series has taken. In true linguistic fashion, each sound is transcribed with a single letter, or 2 for affricate consonants such as ts, ch, and tl. The priority is one-to-one correspondence. With the Spanish alphabet, the S could be written with a C, Z, or even the cedille. Inspired by the International Phonetic Alphabet, the linguistic approach assigns the S itself. Because even modern dialects of Nahuatl recognize short and long vowels, these must also be marked, and the colon is a reliable symbol for it. Here are the fire god names as written with phonetic alphabet characters. I will admit that this convention is the most transparent for linguistic study and textual interpretation, but it looks foreign and distant from the conventional spellings used over the past 500 years. Another reason I hesitate to apply it is because it's not as widely used or familiar as the Old Spanish styles. This transcription is phonetically correct, but it would be much harder to find with today's search engines unless you actually knew what you were looking for. I conducted fieldwork in anthropology and linguistics in the Huasteca region of northern Mexico, and I was looking at subjects of supernatural, ritual, and other religious topics, many of which I look to incorporate into this Nahuatl for Aztec Religion series. While I was doing my fieldwork in the area, I got to work with many school teachers and other educators who became aware of my interests and subjects, and they were also among my most important collaborators and participants for my fieldwork. Among the contributions that they gave me was this textbook, and this is from the Department of Public Education, and it is written in the Huasteca dialect of Nahuatl for the first grade. I bring this up because this is an illustration of the orthography that is used to teach school children in bilingual settings. They are learning both Spanish language and the indigenous language. One part I wanted to point out is toward the end of the textbook, which has some activities and readings for the school children to learn with. And in this part, the title is called the Huehuehteotl, which means the old man. And this is a combination of the Huehue and the Tlacatl, both of which have masculine connotations, but combined in this single word carries a sense of an elderly man. And I wanted to point out, if I can kind of bring this in here, the spelling with the U's, very similar to the original classical writings, such as those found in Sahagun. So in a sense, this brings us back full circle. It is looking for an orthography, an alphabetical spelling that approximates the sounds of the Nahuatl language with characters that are comprehensible and familiar to learners of the language. So you can see that in other places, it is using the K's and the J's to reflect the sounds of the language. One last point that I wanted to show on this page is the way in which Huehuehteotl is spelled. Notice that there is a J, which is cognate with the glottal stop that we heard in the Mexica dialect. That is because in the Huasteca dialect, the glottal stop is still present in a cognate form. It is no longer pronounced as a stop, as the but rather it is aspirated. It is a fricative, so it is pronounced more like the H of English and spelled with the J of Spanish. So this would be sound more like Huehuehteotl. Also notice that there is no marking for vowel length. This is something that the speakers would intrinsically know how to pronounce, so they would understand through context where to insert or where to read the long vowels, because they would be unnecessary to include if you are learning to become a first language speaker of Nahuatl. Otherwise, you would have to know from context how to pronounce long vowels as they are implied in text such as this. If you have watched my other videos on the Aztecs, you may have already seen my style for spelling Nahuatl names. It draws from the original Spanish system because it is the most popular, certainly for many of you. Yet it also represents the glottal stop with H and long vowels with colons. My convention thus combines from different times and purposes, but I find it the most useful for these videos for two reasons. One, its characters represent all the phonemes or sounds significant to spoken Nahuatl. And two, the characters are easy to write, without the constant need to copy and paste special markings from other sources. So, returning to the two names of the fire god, I spelled them like this. This is the orthography for the Eye of the Serpent channel. The next episode in the Nahuatl for Aztec Religion series will return to the linguistic approach as we upscale from the basic sounds to how syllables put them in order. Join us for the following installment.